Claudia Lawrence was born in Malton, North Riding of Yorkshire in 1974. She had spent her early life with her family, her father Peter, her mother Joan and older sister Ali. Claudia's father was a prosperous solicitor in the area. Her mother was a member of the Malton Town Council and served a term as mayor for the town. Claudia was shy, an uncomplicated character with traditional views who valued loyalty and family matters above anything else. While Claudia enjoyed a comfortable childhood, she was privately educated at York College for Girls. She later attended a local catering college and qualified as a chef. She initially worked at several hotels and restaurants in the York area, but she soon became tired of the unsocial hours that were involved with it. A lot of the shifts were afternoons, evenings and weekends, which left no time for Claudia to meet up with friends. So in 2006, she found employment at the University of York, Goodrich College. She was working as a chef in the canteen of the university's main campus, which was better as she finished at 2 p.m. every day and could have a social life too. Working in a canteen was not what Claudia had intended to do with her life when she thought about being a chef. She loved cooking for people, but had not realised how the unsociable hours would affect her. So now she had the freedom to work and see friends too. She knew she wanted to go back to the cuisine she was used to cooking. She had a good CV, she was privately educated, good references, so she knew she could go back to it if she wanted to. Claudia was very pretty, she was slim, she was so good looking, and she got a lot of attention from the opposite sex. She had plenty of friends and a great social life. In 2007, Claudia Lawrence decided to purchase her very own home. It was a small starter house, a small terraced cottage in the York suburb of Haworth, situated about 3 miles or 5 kilometres from the place of her work. Claudia was considered punctual and reliable by her employer. Claudia remained single throughout her life while enjoying a great social life. She was reported to have engaged in a series of short-term relationships and conducted these on a concurrent basis. She was reported to have a number of secret relationships with men, some of whom were married or already in relationships. But Claudia was discreet about this, and her family knew very little, if anything, about the relationships she had with men. This aspect of her life would later cause some media speculation and would also influence the police investigation after her disappearance. After moving into Haworth in 2007, Claudia Lawrence would regularly spend evenings at her local pub, the Nag's Head. It was close to her home. Claudia began some relationships with several men who she met while drinking in the pub, and her father admitted that the liaisons had created an awkward situation with her lovers' partners, but to what extent it was never told. Claudia Lawrence had been to Cyprus on holiday several times. She absolutely loved it there, the greenery, the sea, sand, the cuisine, the cocktails, the people. Claudia just loved it. And she made many friends whilst there. She spoke about living there and believed to have explored job opportunities when she was actually there. At 6 a.m. on the morning of the 18th of March 2009, Claudia had travelled to work. She started her shift at 6 a.m. at the canteen. She completed her shift at 2 p.m. and was recorded on CCTV minutes later, leaving the college on foot. After 3 p.m, she was recorded on CCTV passing a shop on Melrose Gate near to her home. As Claudia was walking home, a car passed. It was a friend from the pub. She offered to give Claudia a lift home. It wasn't far, it was only down the road. So Claudia jumped in and the friend drove her back to her house. It was now approximately 2:50 to 3 p.m. in the afternoon, and Claudia was home safe and sound. She was seen by a neighbour that afternoon also. During the course of the evening, Claudia spoke to both her father and mother using her mobile phone. Her mother described Claudia's mood as normal and relaxed, and the two discussed the forthcoming celebration of Mother's Day. Claudia told her mother that she was at home, that she planned to have an early night since she had to get up in the morning for 5 a.m. for her next shift in order to walk to work, as Claudia's car was in for repair. She sent a final text message from her mobile phone at 8:23 p.m. and a final incoming text was received by her phone at 9:12 p.m. Thereafter, nobody is known to have seen or heard from Claudia Lawrence again. On Thursday, the 19th of March, Claudia Lawrence was scheduled to start work at 6 a.m. So when she did not report for duty, call, or let them know she was not going to be there, her manager called her mobile phone number, although the phone just rang and rang, and then the call was directed to voice messaging service. The manager took no further action. She did not ring anyone or her parents, and Claudia Lawrence had also previously arranged to meet her friend Susie that night at the Nag's Head. Susie attended the pub, but Claudia did not. Susie attempted to contact Claudia and ask her where she was, but Claudia did not answer her phone. She was normally a prolific user of her mobile phone, a Samsung SGH D900, so Susie Cooper was surprised when she was unable to attract a response from Claudia. Susie eventually went home after waiting for some time, but again attempted to contact Claudia the following morning on Friday the 20th, but again without success. Claudia had now been missing for at least 24 hours. Susie became alarmed by the lack of response. It was not normal. Claudia was always on her phone. Susie initially contacted all of their mutual acquaintances, including George, the landlord of the Nag's Head, but nobody had seen or heard from Claudia. But with no luck, Susie decided that she was left with no option but to telephone Claudia's father Peter on the 20th of March to report the situation. Peter telephoned his daughter's manager at the canteen and was told that Claudia had not returned for duty on the 19th or 20th of March. Peter then turned up at Claudia's house and entered using his spare key, in company with George from the Nag's Head. The two men found the house to be in an orderly state. The bed was made, there were unwashed dishes in the sink, suggesting that she'd eaten breakfast that morning of the 19th. Claudia's handbag containing her purse, bank cards, passport, and everything was on the table, and the only significant items missing from her home were her mobile phone and a set of hair straighteners, as well as a rucksack, which she normally used to carry her chef's whites in from work. Indications were that Claudia had left the house normally to go to work on the 19th of March, but never arrived. The North Yorkshire Police was contacted at around 2 p.m. on the 20th of March. In order to report Claudia as a missing person, police officers met with Claudia Lawrence's father Peter at her home later that day. The North Yorkshire Police were initially slow to act on grounds that Claudia was not a vulnerable person, there were no obvious signs or evidence of violence, and they considered it likely that she'd just decided to be absent from everyone and would reappear in a few days. However, her family knew that although she had big dreams, she would never do that without telling them. They were in daily contact with her and knew that if she had some way of contacting them, she would. However, North Yorkshire Police checked her route to work and sent out a public request for information. Claudia Lawrence's family became increasingly insistent that she must have been abducted. After 5 weeks with still no sign of Claudia, the North Yorkshire Police upgraded the inquiry from a missing person to one of suspected murder. But what did they have to suggest that? The original North Yorkshire Police investigation of Claudia's disappearance had to take into consideration various possibilities, including that Claudia had left with a new lover, or she'd left to take up a new job, or merely just to take a break. In recent years, there had been an average of 3,500 missing person reports in that area, but the large majority of those cases were quickly resolved when the missing person reappeared. However, as time went on, Claudia's family became increasingly insistent that she would have contacted them if she'd been able to do so. Maybe Claudia had suffered an accident or medical emergency on her way to work. The route from her home to the place of work was checked at an early stage in the investigation, but no trace of her was found. This possibility was quickly dismissed. That Claudia had maybe been a victim of a chance encounter with a serial killer. Reports were made of various people behaving strangely in the area in the days leading up to Claudia's disappearance. These reports were investigated, but without conclusive results. Cases of known serial killers who might have been active in the area were also considered, but discounted. Claudia may have been a victim of a person who knew her. Criminal profilers suspect that Claudia knew her attacker and suspect her personal life holds a clue to her disappearance. One critical piece of evidence was that Claudia's mobile phone had remained on that day until 12:10 p.m, at which time it was deliberately switched off. But who switched it off? It was determined that the phone had been connected to a mast in the Heworth area of York throughout the morning of the 19th of March, and up to that point it was switched off, which indicates that the phone itself did not leave the local area. So was she with someone in the local area? The only CCTV camera on Claudia Lawrence's most direct route to work was at the Melrose Gate post office, and the recording of the morning on the 19th of March did not show Claudia passing by, although it's not critical since she might have passed out of view of the camera. The independent crime-fighting charity Crime Stoppers offered a reward of £10,000 to anyone providing information which would lead to an arrest in this case and a conviction of any person linked to her disappearance. The North Yorkshire Police received over 1,200 calls offering information. An appeal for help was made by the Archbishop of York. In early June 2009, a reconstruction of Claudia Lawrence's last known movements was featured on the appeal for BBC One's reconstruction of Crime Watch. Also in June, 100 days after his daughter had gone missing, Peter Lawrence launched a YouTube appeal for information. In late August 2009, North Yorkshire Police and the Lawrence family used the annual Whitby Regatta in the North Yorkshire to publicise the campaign about missing Claudia Lawrence. In September 2009, the North Yorkshire Police revealed that the search for Claudia had been extended to Cyprus. Detective Superintendent Ray Galloway stated that Claudia knew several people who lived on the island and that she may have received job offers while there. Detective Galloway stated that some people who had been interviewed had been reluctant and less than candid to be spoken to about Claudia, and that a team of officers had been sent to Cyprus to interview people whom Claudia had met there. It was reported that the last message received by Claudia Lawrence was from a man who was on the island. Now, later in September, detectives made a search of the area of the University of York campus where Claudia worked. In October, North Yorkshire Police revealed that they were looking for a driver of a rusty white van who was seen trying to talk to Claudia on her route to work in the days before she disappeared. Now, on the 24th of March 2010, North Yorkshire Police began searching areas in Heslington in York, based on new information that they'd received. And on the 24th of March, land near to a children's play area, near a muddy farm track, was searched. And on the 25th of March, the search was relocated to a field near to the university, an area of land which is bordered by playing fields and student accommodation. But nothing of significance was found. The search at Heslington was later considered to have been prompted by a hoax information call, and Detective Galloway indicated that the probable explanation for Claudia Lawrence's disappearance lay in her lifestyle, principally in the complexity and mystery of her relationships with men. Back in 2009, the Daily Mail put out a news article about how Claudia Lawrence had a secret affair with a father of two and the relationship had broke up the marriage. Her husband and teenage sweetheart Lee, 38, a scrap metal merchant, had an affair with Claudia 2.5 years ago at her detached home in York. Mrs. Horwell said, "It's been a horrible time, and it did break up my marriage. It was never what I expected. Lee and I were together since I was 18 and I thought we were set for life, so it was very difficult. I found out in the January. I don't think it went on for long, a couple of months perhaps. Lee told me because he couldn't live with himself. We did try and patch our relationship back up, and we went to relate and all those things, but it was no good. I could never understand it. She was younger than me, prettier than me, so why did she pick Lee? She could have had the pick As if the shock of the personal betrayal wasn't bad enough, Mrs. Horwell said that she'd had to struggle with daily reminders as the investigation grinds on what appears to be a painfully slow pace. Lee's wife said, "She obviously is a complex character and I don't condone what she did, but neither did she deserve this. I feel dreadful for the family and I just hope they find her safe and well." She said the police came to see us about 3 or 4 weeks after the event. "I don't for a minute think Lee had anything to do with her disappearance, but I wasn't surprised when they came round. I was half expecting it. I told them everything I knew. I've got nothing to hide," she said. "I don't wish her any malice. I just hope that they find her and she can slip back into my past." The investigation centred around construction of a rogues gallery of men she had been involved with. One Sky News journalist stated at the time that Claudia apparently lived a significant part of her life in secret. For a privately educated daughter of a county solicitor, he said that Claudia had some unusual acquaintances, and this remains the only missing person case where I have been warned off or threatened not once but twice, he said. The general finding which emerged from the original inquiry was that Claudia Lawrence had probably been abducted and murdered shortly after leaving her home on the 19th of March. It was considered likely that her killer was a local man known to her. In June 2013, North Yorkshire Police announced the £300,000 creation of a new major crime unit, the MCU, set up to ease the burden of day-to-day policing. Based in Harrogate, the MCU was to be tasked from October 2013 to handle crimes including RAPE and cold cases. In July 2013, North Yorkshire Police said that the unit would assess several stalled cases, which it opened in October, including Claudia's disappearance. The MCU subsequently assessed that with Claudia's case, they had carried out new forensic searches at her home using what they described as advanced techniques not available back in 2009. The MCU found additional fingerprints and a man's DNA on a cigarette end in her car. There was work surrounding her mobile phone, which showed from cell site activity that she had spent time in the Acombe area of York in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. On the 5th anniversary of her disappearance, a new appeal was made on Crime Watch, which was aired on the 19th of March 2014. And the CCTV footage recovered in 2009 showed a silver Ford Focus hatchback car, manufactured between 1998 and 2004, driving along Heworth Road. The car's brake lights come on as it approaches the level with Claudia's cottage. New investigation made a number of arrests, and on the 13th of May 2014, a 59-year-old man was arrested by North Yorkshire Police on suspicion of murdering Claudia Lawrence. He lived close to her home and had been a colleague of hers at the University of York. The two were reported to have been on a friendly basis. He was often known to give her lifts in his car to and from work. Searches were made of the suspect's house in York and his mother's house in North Shields, Tyneside. He was released on police bail the following day and then released from his bail without charge in November of that year, failing to find any substantial evidence on him. In July 2014, North Yorkshire Police arrested a man named Paul Harris. He was the landlord of the Acombe pub, which has since been renamed the Clockhouse pub, on suspicion of perverting the cause of justice. Paul was quickly released without charge. He complained that the police had excavated a section of the cellar floor in his pub. Paul stated that Claudia had been a customer at his pub in the weeks before her disappearance, and he had spoken to her, but stated that this was his only connection to Claudia. Other arrests were made later, but those concerned were all released and none were charged. In 2015, police released CCTV footage of an unidentified man walking nearby to the alleyway at the rear of Claudia's home. This was on the 18th of March 2009 at 7:15 p.m. and on the 19th at 5:07 a.m. 5:50 a.m. On the 8th of March 2016, the Crown Prosecution Service refused to pursue a case submitted by North Yorkshire Police against 4 men who had been arrested on suspicion of murder, citing lack of evidence. The suspects had all been regular customers of the Nag's Head. They all denied any involvement in Claudia's disappearance. The North Yorkshire Police complained about a lack of cooperation from witnesses. The second investigation then ended, having achieved very little. In August and September 2021, police engaged in the Claudia Lawrence case searched Sand Hutton gravel pits, a wooded area about 8 miles or 13 kilometres northeast of York city centre. The search was reportedly prompted by new evidence, although police would not state what the new evidence was. The land had been used as fishing ponds in 1969. Police drained one of the lakes on the site to allow a fingertip examination of the lake's bed. Ground-penetrating radar equipment and cadaver dogs were used in the search. And at the end of the search, Detective Wayne Fox, senior investigating officer in the Claudia Lawrence case, stated that nothing significant had been found. In his 2017 book, Catching a Serial Killer, My Hunt for Murderer Christopher Halliwell, Stephen Fulcher, the senior investigating officer in the murder of Sian O'Callaghan, suggested that the similarities between Claudia and Sian cases could be related. Sian had left a Swindon nightclub at 3 a.m. and started a 20-minute walk to her home. A licensed taxi driver, Chris Halliwell, had pulled up beside her, offered her a ride. But when she'd accepted the offer, instead of taking Sian O'Callaghan home, Christopher had driven her to a secluded place where he murdered her. It is notable that Sian was murdered by Christopher Halliwell on the 19th of March 2011, and her body was concealed. Although convicted of only 2 murders, Christopher Halliwell had been linked to many other violent offences against women involving assaults, RAPEs, disappearances and murders. The date of the 19th of March figures in a number of his cases, and this date is believed to have had some significance to Christopher Halliwell. One such case is the disappearance of Swindon teacher Linda Rozelle on the 19th of March 2002 while walking to work. However, Linda's husband was convicted of her murder, and her family have stated that they have no doubt over his guilt and conviction. In 2018, highly regarded miscarriage of justice organisation Inside Justice investigated the Linda Rozelle case and the alleged links to Christopher Halliwell as part of the BBC documentary Conviction, but it concluded that the conviction was safe and stated that there was nothing linking Christopher Halliwell to the crime other than speculation. In 2009, Christopher Halliwell was living in Swindon, in Wiltshire, the location of the 2 murders where he was convicted of. In his book, Stephen Fulcher stated that Christopher Halliwell had links to Yorkshire because his father lived there. However, his father lived in Huddersfield, which is some distance from York, and his father died several years before Claudia's disappearance. So, why would he have reason to be there? Both the North Yorkshire Police and Wiltshire Police have stated that there is no direct evidence linking Christopher Halliwell to Claudia Lawrence. The Wiltshire Police have disclosed that they have CCTV evidence of Christopher Halliwell buying petrol at a petrol station in Swindon on the evening that Claudia Lawrence disappeared. Nevertheless, some observers believe that the North Yorkshire Police's focus on Claudia's lifestyle and social circle may have been misguided in regard to Christopher Halliwell's possible involvement. Claudia Lawrence's disappearance caused difficulty arising out of her family's inability to manage her assets and liabilities. Notably, they were unable to sell her home, and the mortgage continued to accrue charges. Claudia's father, Peter, a solicitor, campaigned for the law to be modified in order to allow the appointment of guardians for the affairs of missing people, as they continued to have to pay for her mortgage. This campaigning eventually succeeded with the passing of the Guardianship Missing Persons Act of 2017, which was introduced in Parliament as a private member's bill. The bill, which came into force in July 2019, allows the family of a missing person to apply to the court for guardianship of that person's estate 90 days after their disappearance. The new law became popularly known as Claudia's Law. But to this day, Claudia has not been found. Nobody seems to know where she is. Police have looked here, there and everywhere, possibly thinking that she had been abducted on her way to work, but then stating she went missing the night before. My feeling is that when Claudia disappeared, the things that were missing from her home were hair straighteners and a bag. To me, the only person that would want hair straighteners, usually, is a woman. And I'm wondering if the woman or wife of somebody she had been dating had come round to her house that evening or that morning and made Claudia disappear by means unknown, then taking her hair straighteners by putting them in her rucksack and taking them away. But I think it's somebody that lives close, after her phone was only turned off later that day and it was in the area the whole time. So it must have been somebody that lived close. What do you think about this? Let me know what you think happened to Claudia Lawrence. If you have any information on what happened to Claudia all those years ago, it's still important that you come forward. Any small pieces of information could be that one thing that leads to an arrest and the Lawrences being able to bring their daughter home. If you do have any information on where Claudia could be, then please contact North Yorkshire Police in the UK